Good day, GE on the porch. George Bernard Shaw has been quoted as saying these words. Let me read them to you. He says, "This is the true joy in life, the being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one, the being thoroughly worn out before you are thrown on the scrap heap, and being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy." Now, Shaw was far from being a Christian, and so this is not a Christian writing. But what he was saying was that everyone ought to have a driving force in their life, something that gives meaning and purpose to one's life. Paul wrote of his driving forces in Romans chapter 1. He wrote of his driving forces, the compulsions that made what seems to have been a scrawny little man with eye troubles to travel around a vast territory on foot, undergo beatings, stand up to humiliation, suffer persecution, and finally even suffering death for that driving force in his life. I want to share with you today just two of those driving forces, compulsions for a Christian. The gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, should impart to a Christian, first of all, a desire for fruit. Let me read you verse 13 of chapter 1. Paul writes, "Now I would not have you ignorant, brethren, that oftentimes I purpose to come unto you, but was let hitherto, that I might have some fruit among you also, even as among other Gentiles." Now, what Paul was talking about here was a driving force in his life which brought about a desire for fruit or other souls or Christianity. Notice that Paul had a determination. He said in that verse, "I purposed." In other words, Paul was determined to see people saved and their lives changed for the cause of God. A desire for fruit drove his life with a determination and a continuation. He says, "Among you also." He'd already been doing this. Now he says, "I want to do more. I want to come to you, and I want to minister to you, and I want to see your life change." Paul wasn't just satisfied with seeing one or two. He wanted people to come to the Lord. What would happen in our churches and in our communities and in our families and in ourselves if we purpose to see people saved and their lives changed? Well, that was a driving force, a desire for fruit in Paul's life, and it should be in ours. But second of all, a driving force in his life was a sense of debt. Verses 14 and 15. Let me read those to you. Paul writes, "I am a debtor both to the Greeks and to the barbarians, both to the wise and to the unwise. And so, as much as in me is, I am ready to preach the gospel to you that are at Rome also." You see, Paul had a sense of debt, and it drove his life. Not only a desire for fruit, but a sense of debt to every person. Let me tell you something. The world, Christian, doesn't owe you anything. You and I, as Christians, owe the world. We owe the children. We owe the drunks. We owe the addicts. We owe the lost. Because you and I have what they do not have. We owe the world. And it's a debt that must be paid. Because, why? Because we are paid for by his blood. And because we are heirs to a boundless treasure that must be shared. We must pay a debt. If your neighbor's house caught on fire, would you walk by and say, "Well, that's bad, but nothing I can do"? Or would you go and would you call the fire department, and would you see if there's somebody in the house, and would you see if there's some way that you could help? Or if they had a broken leg, would you walk by and say, "Well, that's too bad, but I'm not going to help"? Or would you go to them maybe cover them, maybe call an ambulance, maybe give them some help until more help arrives. Or if they had a flat tire, if you could help, would you help them? You see, we owe people. It's not whether or not we know them. It's not even whether or not we like them. It is because of the love of Christ that is to come out from us and into the world where we owe. We owe a debt to the world. Would you want Jesus to say, why didn't you help? You knew you could. I wouldn't. Would you like Jesus to say, why didn't you help? Why didn't you witness? Why didn't you love? I don't want him to say that to me. I ask you, what drives your life? What drives it? What are the compulsions in your life? Is it money or fame or strength or something of that nature? I hope not. I hope it is the compulsion, the driving force of the gospel of Jesus, a desire for fruit, a sense of debt to the world. And I wonder, will you ask God to make the gospel of Jesus a driving force in your life? Have a great day in the Lord.